Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show today, and welcome Dr. Colette Sinclair. I'm so honored that you are here sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. We are going to be talking about emotions, and you have such a body of work that's so impressive. I would love it if you could share with our audience a little bit about yourself before we get into our topic today.
Sure. Well, I've had a pretty substantial career for over 20 years. I've been working with the mind and neurological health. And the development of my career has led me to study different aspects of people and what really develops their health. And where I've landed is that emotions are the quickest path to change our chemistry, and that our chemical health is what allows us to really express health in every way, relationally, circumstantially, physically. So essentially, I've done a lot of different things in my career, but at this point, I think that emotions are the most straightforward way to building overall holistic health.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. With a lot of times, I've met a lot of healthy people, and I want to talk about this with you because I feel like you're such a great person to go to with this question. But there's a lot of people that I know personally in my life who are doing everything correct. They're so healthy. They are so vibrant when it comes to their diet and their exercise. And there is a big piece that isn't being cared for. It's like they're doing everything that they say to do to be healthy, but there is the emotional component of their life that is very wonky. Maybe it's because they're so overloaded with stress or whatever that may be. And, I've had people get in my life that have gotten really sick, and you're like, no, this person will not and put anything in their mouth that's not organic. They do yoga every day, like literally when you think of health, you think of this person, and then yet they got so sick. So I would love to talk a little bit about that because I feel like it's almost easier, but you're going to give us tools, but it's almost easier to be like, okay, I have to eat this way and work out this way. I don't have to think about what's in my heart and what's in my head, because that seems like more challenging, right?
You touch on a very critical piece. I mean, this is exactly why my work exists, is the fact that so many people are doing everything correctly physically. They have perfect diets, they have great workout routines, maybe they're listening to podcasts, they're supplementing, they're doing everything on the physical level. But if we don't address the mental level and the emotional level, which leads to, and we'll get into that later, leads to our spiritual health, we are not going to be healthy. And the reason for that is I say all of the time, and this is not, this is a conclusion that I arrived at, but I'm not the first person to talk about this or speak about this. There's two paths to disease. One path is nutrient deficiency. We're not getting what we need in some way, right? The other path is toxic burden. And what nobody talks about is how emotional toxins are impacting us and how our negative thought patterns are impacting our health. And that is creating disease states. So yeah, you can have somebody who's doing yoga, they're eating everything organic, they're doing all of the right things physically, and if they don't address their negative thought patterns, and the negative emotions that maybe they've buried, they've suppressed, or the ones that they live in and engage with every single day, they're going to be unhealthy. They're going to create a disease state in their body. And in my work, clinically, I've met a ton of people who outwardly they appear that they're healthy and they look like they've got everything going on. but internally they are not well, or they're struggling with some kind of a chronic or acute health issue. So that's why my work exists. That's really the path, over this 20-year career where it's led me. This is where I've landed in terms of, if we don't address the most essential component of our human being, which is what differentiates us from other species, our consciousness, our emotions. If we don't address that and we don't create health in that area, we're not going to be well. So it's an important body of work.
Yeah, it's so important. Go ahead.
So the way, so I think, you hit the nail on the head when you talk about how emotions can create this toxic state in our body. It's all about the chemistry that we are creating in our body. Eating healthy food is one way of creating good chemistry, right? Alkaline water, you're eating vegetables, you're alkalizing your body. But there's, the chemistry that's created through our emotional state, and in particular, stress. So you talked about how stress impacts people's health. Stress is the biggest dysregulator of health, especially when it comes to females, and how it disrupts our hormones, how it dysregulates our nervous system. I actually want to take that statement back, because it's very dysregulating to everyone, regardless of what gender you are. But in particular, females, we have the added component of, reproductive health. And our hormones are much more delicate than a male's. And that means that we need to behave very differently than males. And one of the common issues I say, and I know that I'm veering off a little bit here, but women these days are trying very hard to behave like males. We want to be just as productive. We want to, earn as much. We want to have the same level of visibility, etc., etc. And we are not males. And we are meant to be different. And our systems are different. And different chemicals, different organic chemicals, regulate and sustain our systems. And so I think the best thing that people in general, whether you're male or female, the best thing that you can do is be very informed about what your unique system needs, given your current circumstances, your historical background, your health, your current health, maybe some of your past experiences. So putting all of those pieces together and really designing and engineering, what do I need for my current health protocol? And then, going forward in a very respectful way to develop the healthiest chemistry that's possible. Now, one of the things that changes our chemistry most quickly and that regulates stress most quickly, regulates our nervous system most quickly, is our emotional state. So, I didn't go too much into detail when we started out about my professional background, because I'm not a self-promoter, to tell you the truth. I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist, but in my career, I've done a lot of varied things in studying the mind, in studying cognitive processes, in studying nervous system regulation, and all of these different standards of care in terms of what we say has value for people in incorporating in different interventions, okay? Mm-hmm. And what I have found is that the interventions that are paid for are not the ones that are actually moving the needle with health, okay? So what that means is that we as people have to take responsibility for our health. We have to seek out the interventions that are going to be most healthy, most beneficial, and we have to be responsible for incorporating them. So that's that's a different mindset, right? To take responsibility for your health and to say, I'm going to be an empowered person and I'm going to seek out the solutions that are going to be most helpful and beneficial rather than putting my health in someone else's hands, which is one reason that makes your show and your mission so valuable, is that people can access this information and they can make a decision with how they want to use the information that you're providing to them. So
that's, it's funny because when you were talking about how the emotions are what, can trigger the stressors and how the stress will affect our body and our nervous system. It reminded me, I just had a guest not too long ago, and she was chronically ill. She had Lyme, and it was really bad. And she was like the really did everything right on paper type of person as well. And she said, one of the biggest reasons that she was able to recover was because she did take this part of her emotional state very seriously, even though that was like, she's a scientist too. And she was like, that's not, that feels like woo-woo. Like that stuff felt like woo-woo to her. Like that's not as important as like, I need to eat right and I need to get my supplements. And that is what healed her, is what she was saying. And so I'd love if you could talk more about how the emotions, and people also talk a lot about right now, the nervous system, and how that is so important and how we're so dysregulated in our nervous systems these days. And so maybe you can share with us more about how get into the emotion part of it, because how is that affecting our nervous systems if we are having these emotions that are stressing us out or upsetting us and we're not dealing with them, we're not looking at that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different components here. So there's stress and how that dysregulates us. There's our emotional state, our dominant emotional state, the emotional state we live in most frequently, and how that affects our health. And then there's, the overall nervous system. So if I could just frame it out a little bit here, our nervous system is our innate technology for interacting in the world. It is so critical. So our nervous system, it is constantly feeding us information about if our environment is safe, or if there's a threat in our environment, and how our body needs to respond, how we need to mobilize. And right now what's happening is that there is such an overwhelm of information that people are not filtering correctly. Also, we are overstimulated with the amount of content, and because we're so saturated with content, we're a little bit desensitized. So what does, the entertainment industry do? They just keep upping, the stimulation, right? So more sex, more violence, more whatever it is that's going to engage our attention, right? Because it's all about keeping our attention. And people are in general, I think it's a challenge for people to be very present and aware. And so humans, we like to escape through content. So we are seeking that stimulation. And the other thing is that now that, we've had this rise in technology, let's just say since 2007, since the iPhone was released, that level of engagement with technology is so normalized. I was recently, in other countries, we have laws about how much technology is acceptable for young people, right? So it's highly regulated. Like, for example, in Japan, children under 6 years old cannot have devices, and their screen time is limited to 30 minutes. After 3 years old, 30 minutes. I mean, it's highly regulated. There are, in restaurants, there's no devices allowed in certain countries. But all of that was to say that I was recently on the coast in Italy, and I would walk past families, beautiful families, and, mom, dad, and brother, sister, everyone sitting there engaged with their screen separately in one of the most gorgeous places in the world. So that is the attention war that we are in, is that if you can provide enough stimulation, you can keep that person's attention. And if you hold their attention, they don't direct their attention elsewhere. And they're not directing their attention to inside, right? To growing and developing inside. They're not directing their attention towards wielding their innate technology through their nervous system. They're not directing their attention towards their goals, their purpose in life. They are completely stuck and engaged in whatever they're being fed. So it's definitely a control device for the mind. Now, what it's doing to the body is it's disorganizing and dysregulating the nervous system. All this short form content, it's creating this volatility in cortisol and in stress hormones, this continuous volatility, which is so toxic. Stress really is the silent killer. And we need to create more conversations about how this is disrupting neurochemicals, it's disrupting hormones, it's disrupting cardiovascular health, it's disrupting metabolic function. It's disrupting quite a lot. Now, people are starting to become interested in stress. And so what I see showing up a lot is that people are, they're going into this protect my peace movement. Okay? So they, everyone's talking about setting boundaries and protecting their peace. And, I think that the best thing you can do is change how you show up in a situation, change what you choose to think about a situation, change how you choose to respond, and actually consciously direct how you're feeling on a regular basis. That is the best way to protect your peace, is to actually generate peace and to be a force of peace in the world. I think the more that conversation is guided and the more that we create context around this idea of peace, the better off everyone's going to be. Anyway, one of the things that people can do to regulate their nervous system is to eliminate short form content. And I know it's not a popular conversation. I know a lot of people don't want to do it. You know what's amazing though, is for the clients I work with, when I recommend these energetic hygiene habits, most people are resistant, so we start slow, but it's life-changing for them. Mm-hmm. People start sleeping better, their affect changes, their attention, concentration, focus improves, all of that. So one of the pieces I would say would be to be vigilant with how you use technology and to create those energetic boundaries in your home and your work environments. How much time am I actually spending on the screen? What content am I viewing and allowing into my body, understanding that that content is dysregulating me on some level, understanding that the technology that I'm using is dysregulating me on some level, because it's not natural. Now, I'm not anti-technology. I love technology. It makes our life so much more convenient. Look at this. We can meet together and we can share a conversation and we can provide that conversation to a lot of people because of technology. So technology is a beautiful tool, but a tool is meant to be wielded. It's meant to be used for a purpose. And so I think, helping people to get in control of how they're using technology and how that technology influences their nervous system is a huge topic. So going back to the nervous system, as our innate technology, this is our interactive system for engaging with reality. And what is writing the program for that technology is our emotional state, which is why state training is so critical. The more emotional state training, it's like training yourself physically, okay? So everybody can agree that if you go to the gym, you get on a certain physical, protocol. Let's just take Pilates, for example, okay? Most of us can agree, we see a person with a Pilates body and we go, wow, I really need to start doing Pilates, okay? Myself, okay? I think this all the time, all right? They're very toned, they're strong, right? We all know that if we went to Pilates 4 times a week, we're gonna have a Pilates body, okay? Because it's a process of conditioning. Now, emotional state training is the same thing, only it's, I'm saying, far more valuable than physically training. Because when you condition your emotions, you change your perceptual lens of the world, which means you change how you see the world, how you show up in the world, and what the world is showing you in terms of opportunities, experiences. You're actually changing your filter, the filter with which you engage in the world. So I have concluded through all of my work with hundreds of people and program development and neurological assessment and changes in consciousness and all of that work, what I have decided is that when people can change their dominant emotional state, this is what I've seen, this is what I've clinically tested. When they can change their dominant emotional state, they change their mentality, they change their physical health, they change their relationships, and they change their actual reality. Now, one of the things that I talk a lot about is immune health and how emotions influence immune health. And it's really interesting because, Andrew Huberman on Monday, he just came out with a podcast. He had a guest on talking about immune health and how emotions influence immune health and how, when we're triggered by a trauma, we actually create the same level of immunity that we had during that trauma. So it's really fascinating to me the way these conversations are starting to unfold. But it's 100% accurate. If you are in a healthy emotional state, because of how that influences the chemistry in your body, it changes your level of immunity. And I'll tell you right now what I say all the time. If your body created something, your body can destroy it. You, at some point in time, people that are unhealthy, not you personally, but people that have a chronic or acute health issue, if their body has manifested a disease state of any kind, they in some way gave their body what was necessary to create that, whether it was an ongoing negative thought pattern, right? Or whether it was an ongoing negative emotional state, grief, hatred, resentment, whatever it may be, anxiety even, or whether it was, garbage food. They gave their system the resources to create that disease state. Now, if you give your system the resources to create something different, it will. And that means that through our emotions, through our thoughts, our conscious attention, and what we feed our body, we can change anything. So the biggest barrier that I see is what people believe they can and cannot do. And I've seen some phenomenal changes, okay? I have seen people's health issues defy, medical science, all right? Through their emotional state, through their conscious attention, through what they choose to believe going forward in their life. But I think the real issue is this issue of being in an empowered state. Because again, humans, like culturally, socially, we're trained to give our power away, to give our authority away. First to our parents, then our teachers, then the law, right? And I'm saying, like, we need social structure. I'm not saying everybody should, not abide by these collective agreements. We need these collective agreements, but we should certainly take responsibility for our health and, what we choose to think and what we choose to feel and what we choose to create in our life. Now, I do think that sometimes we create things because it serves a certain path in, developmentally. So for example, I've seen people have health issues and then they are able to completely shift and go down a different path in their life because it serves to wake them up. It serves to get them to think about, what do I really value? How do I want to use my time? So sometimes another piece that I encourage is, rather than fighting what's showing up in our life, let's choose to be curious. Let's choose to go in and explore it. Why did this show up? What is it trying to show me? What am I meant to learn here? How can I learn and grow from this? How can I use this to inform me for how to go forward differently in my life? So that's an empowered position.
I love that. Okay, so there's so many things. One of the things that you said is, and I love that this is not something, if you are on a health journey or you want to prevent disease in your life, or say you already have some chronic illness, this isn't some information that you're going to get from your doctor. Like you said, we need to empower ourselves to take our health into our own hands, especially when it comes to this piece, because this isn't something we're going to be told to do in a medical setting, and it's such an important piece of it. And it's so fascinating that our emotions can play such a big role. Like you mentioned, all of these physical things that it can affect our cardiovascular health, our immune system. Like that is, we all know stress is bad, quote unquote, but like what it actually does, I don't think a lot of people are aware of, or how it can actually be so critically important to our systems. But what you were saying, and I want to make sure I have this right, about kind of changing that dominant emotional state if it's not serving you. So it's almost like you're getting, maybe inputting stress, and it's almost like some people interpret it differently than others, like through emotions. So like if something bad happened or something happened, and some people could be like, oh, the way they're interpreting it emotionally could be what's keeping them stuck or maybe going down a bad path physically. Or other people could be like, oh, that happened, no big deal, let's move on. Just like, it's almost like the perspective of the thing that's happening to them is so different with different people based on like how they're using their emotions to kind of decipher the stressor. Is that something that, am I on the right track here a little bit with?
You're exactly right. It's our perception of events that determines if it's going to dysregulate us or not. And it's what we choose to think about a situation. So the way that you can get ahead of that is something highly dysregulating can happen, and you have conscious awareness, so you can determine how you're going to choose to think about it. So when we don't have that awareness, that presence of mind, and we're not consciously directing our attention, that's when our system gets hijacked. And when our system gets hijacked, stress constricts our body. So it constricts us on a lot of levels, but just on a very basic level, it constricts us cardiovascularly, right? And so it reduces the blood flow to the brain. It reduces the blood flow to our extremities, and it changes, what's available to us in terms of our perceptual awareness, because when the blood flow is constricted and there's only blood flow to the back of our brain, which is our motor cortex, we can't think. We can't choose how we want to see a situation. So the most important thing that we can do when something, let's just say dysregulating happens. Let's say you get pulled over, for speeding. Something that we can all relate to. It doesn't have to be traumatic, but something that's like, it's stressful, right? You can choose how you want to think about it, right? The first thing that I like to talk about is how we can regulate and anchor ourselves through the breath. I like to talk about, what we all have available to us all of the time. And the resources that we're walking around with all of the time. Our lungs, this is a very powerful piece of equipment that we have right here. And I think a lot of people don't think about that, especially teenagers that are walking around vaping and all of the time. I'm like, do you understand what you're doing? This equipment right here, it allows us to change our consciousness more quickly than anything. And there's a lot of different breath techniques. You can go on TikTok, you can go on Instagram, and you can see all these people promoting different breath techniques. And I probably teach myself, to my clients, I probably teach 20, 25 of them on a regular basis, depending on what state of consciousness you want to access. But I'll tell you, the quickest way to regulate your nervous system is going to be through a diaphragmatic breath, which means that you're very deliberately pulling it into your diaphragm. And it's because of how the nerve endings in the diaphragm feed the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that regulates the nervous system. It's the nerve that feeds from the brain all the way to our tailbone. And so when we breathe through our nose fully and completely, filling up our diaphragm, and then releasing out of our mouth or out of our nose, what matters is that you're filling up your diaphragm. That instantly regulates your nervous system. So if you're in a stressful situation, you can access that diaphragmatic breathing, and what that does is it allows you to stay in that prefrontal cortex and have access to your thoughts, so that you can direct what you want to think about the situation and how you want to feel about it. So for example, going back to our speeding ticket example, or our example of getting pulled over by a police officer, right? It's like, oh, what a bummer. I shouldn't have been going that fast, or whatever it is. But you can also decide, okay, I'm going to accept this situation, whether I was speeding or not, doesn't really matter. This is the authority in this situation. The best thing for me and the best thing for everyone involved here is that I'm nice and relaxed and I go with the flow. I totally accept wherever this is going to go, and I can make a different choice later on today about how I want to deal with this. So I keep my system nice and relaxed, take a couple of deep diaphragmatic breaths, so that when police officer comes to the window, I can be nice and responsive and kind and generous and help that transaction go well. And that will influence the situation, right? It'll influence the manner in which things go. So I'm not saying you're going to get out of a speeding ticket, but what I'm saying is that it's really important that your system's not influenced through that stress. And it's the same thing with any situation. Your husband comes home and tells you, he wants to be with someone else. Okay. It's not my preference, but what's going to be most helpful to myself and everyone involved? I'm nice and calm. I'm nice and regulated. I'm not going to allow my health to be impacted by someone else's choices. I'm not going to create more disruption and more dysregulation by being angry about this, right? I'm concerned with my health and my experience in the world. And that's not selfish, that's generous. because the experience that we're creating within ourselves is feeding into this collective experience in the world. Our energy is influencing everyone's energy that we touch throughout the day, and also within all of the spheres that we work and live in. So what I'm saying is, whether something is big or small, what we choose to think about it and what we choose to feel about it are the most profound actions that we can take. And we don't have to get in there and control everything, especially as females. We can be smart about how we direct our energy and influence that situation. And we have to be. And again, I'm shifting us back to this conversation about how females want to behave like males. We want to jump in there and control the situation and figure out how we're going to physically control it. We don't have to do that. We're more powerful than that. We can go within, we can collect our innate resources, and we can direct our energy in a way where we have greater influence and power in that situation. And that's the state training that is really going to create the shifts in your life, whether it's health, whether it's relationships, whether it's productivity and prosperity. This is really, this is the new science. This is the new science. So it's really a matter of what I see, okay, for people in general. Do they believe it's possible? Do they believe that they can change? And then are they willing to discipline their body? And here's the thing. Most people are willing to, I meet people all the time, they're willing to go to the gym. They're willing to go to Pilates. But being willing to change how you speak, being willing to change what you give your attention over to, and what you choose to think about a situation and how you choose to feel, that's much more difficult, because they're intangibles. We're working in a realm that is, it's not easily seen, and it's not easily accessed. Most people's mind, it's just running away all the time. They're not directing it. So directing your emotions and directing your mentality, it's probably the most valuable thing a person, regardless of age, regardless of gender, it's the most valuable thing a person can do to gain power in their life and to influence the direction of their life.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because it's like, it's easier to do certain things in our life. It's so much more measurable too. Like if you're going to make a goal, your goal setting, it's easy to say, well, I need to lose this many pounds and I need to go do this many times. But so you're talking about changing the way that we're looking at the world, our state training. So I mean, obviously people, even if they wanted to do that, it seems very difficult to know how if you're not trained in this. So you talk about breathing. It's funny too, when you were talking about breathing, I was thinking how many people in stressful situations, they stop breathing, they hold their breath. And it's like the opposite of what we need to be focusing on. When you talk about state training, what are some other things that we can do? How can we, I think we need to become, you mentioned this earlier, aware in the first place that we're doing it. If things are coming in and we are perceiving them in a constant negative framework, some people might not even realize they're doing that. That could be that's just the world. If you go into any comment section in any social media platform, your mind is blown. If you're aware of this, you're like, wow, this person lives in this negative world that is so harmful, and they don't think they have any control, power. It's all happening to them. How do those people sort of wake up to that, become aware of that, so that they can even want to change in the first place? And then I'd also love to hear more, how do we change our state? What is the state training that we can start to work on so that we can look at the world differently, that we can to have these situations come to us and we can interpret them differently in our bodies? And also, this is a lot, so we'll break this down, but also I'm so interested, if you're dealing with something, back to the health conversation, and you're like, okay, I'm good on paper, but like there's some mind emotional work that needs to happen here. Like, how do we begin that process? Sorry, I gave you a lot there.
That's okay. I'm gonna start with the last piece.
Okay.
Okay. So for people that have recovered from a health issue, I have such a heart for people that have made it through a major illness and they're on the other side, because what I see a lot is they have an element of fear that they carry with them, like this could come back, because if the issue is managed, or they've made it through treatment, they are just always living with this fear. So this is the time to actually get into the real work. If you have made it through a major health issue, you have been, in my estimation, you've been given grace, and you've been given a chance to get in there and do the real work, which is, emotionally and mentally, how do I want to move forward in my life? That's who I was from that point of my life until I manifested that disease. A disease state was created in my body. That was the person I was then. I now am anew. I've gone through treatment. I have my system managed. So who do I want to be going forward? Mm-hmm. So it's not the time to say, I've battled, for example, I've battled breast cancer, right? Because a lot of women, they go through that. It's actually a very large percentage of women go through that. They make it to the other side because surgery or chemo, and they're survivors, okay? Your system manifested a disease state. You've made it to the other side. Do you want to continue to define yourself as a survivor? Do you want to continue to associate yourself with that disease state? Or do you want to disassociate yourself with the disease state and associate yourself with radiant health? What are you giving your attention to? Because whatever you're giving your attention to is going to define your life. That's the biggest piece for people who have recovered from a major health issue. Do not feed that beast. That's what I like to say. Don't feed the beast. Don't focus your attention on the disease state, which is the problem that I see with most people. I say focus on what you want to create going forward, which is radiant health, which is presence and connection within my family, whatever it is, community, giving back, being of service, possibly, whatever it may be, whatever meaning or purpose you found through that journey, which a lot of people do. So that would be one thing. And then remind me some of the other pieces here.
Yeah, one of them was, what are some examples of how do we change and train our bodies and to have that state change? Like, how do we go from, I'm perceiving the world this one way and that might not be helpful and I want to change.
Yes. Okay, but I think the other thing that you had mentioned was victim mentalities. So, because it was kind of a two-part question, but it's related to overall consciousness, level of consciousness. So, emotional posture, it is a method of scaffolding consciousness, increasing a person's consciousness. So, a person that's living in a victim state where they don't take responsibility for their life, their health, everything's happening to them, they're living at a level of consciousness of fear. In the level of fear, which also, by the way, just so you know, produces anxiety. So if you see somebody who is dealing with a chronic anxiety issue, they're living in the consciousness of fear. That state has no power available to it. Physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally, they do not have any power. Okay? So what I do is I scaffold a person's consciousness up, right? So if a person's living in fear, they're not going to jump into acceptance or willingness or reason or, or ease. That's too far away for them. So if somebody's living in fear, the next place that we can take them is into desire, okay? Desire is the energetic upgrade for fear. So maybe they desire to be healthy. Maybe they desire to not live in fear. Maybe they desire, I don't know, a new car or a new relationship. But that's what we have to target. We have to target desire. From desire, we target pride, right? Taking pride in yourself, how you're showing up, in your behavior, in the information that you're studying. And eventually where we're going is we actually want to get to at least courage. Courage says, I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. So courage is courage is the level of consciousness where we have the ability to start to gain personal power. All of the levels of consciousness under courage, there's no true power available to us. What is available to us is force, is control through manipulation, or control through physical force, financial force, anything else. This is a lot of what you see, in unhealthy or toxic relationships, or war, or dysfunctional political systems. You name it. These are systems or relationships that are not actually operating from a powerful place. So this is really important information, because when people start to understand frequency, energetic frequency, which is determined by our emotional state, when you start to understand that, you see how it relates to you personally, but also your relationships, the systems you live within. And then that informs your perception. How do I choose to see what's going on politically in this world, in our country, in our state? How do I choose to see what's going on in my home, with, my teenagers, or with my spouse, or in my friend group, or in my work environment. So the way that we change is we grow and stabilize our consciousness. All right. So, and we can't, the mistake that I see a lot of people make is they want to just shoot to a higher level, right? Most people want to shoot into love. They want to move from fear to love. But if we don't stabilize, let's just say like the platforms of consciousness, if we don't stabilize at each level, then if something dysregulating happens, we drop right down again. So it's really important to do that stair-step process, if you will, and to understand that process as we go. We can have the goal, we can have the desire. Let's say we're at fear. We have the desire of, I want to be at love, okay? And I understand that I need to go through pride, and I need to go through willingness, and I need to go through reason before I make it to love. There's many steps in between, but I'm just giving an example, and I'm available for that process because my goal is to grow and develop. And what I fundamentally believe is that as human beings, that's what we're here to do in the physical plane, is to grow and develop, to learn. Right? Our spirits, because that's what we are. We're spirits in a body. If you've ever witnessed death of any kind, even let's say with an animal, when the spirit leaves the body, there's nothing there. It's not animated anymore. So we are spirits in a body. Our body is our system. It's the system that allows us to interact on the physical plane. That's beautiful. It's a gift. People, think about this. People spend so much time hating their bodies. They do. They hate their bodies. They hate their bodies for the physical form that they're in, for the color that they are, for the gender that they are, for the body type that they have. What if we just start appreciating and loving whatever body we have, because thank you, I get to interact on this physical plane,
Yeah.
And like, if we could just love our bodies, that would clear up a lot of health issues. I'll tell you right now.
Yeah.
One of the things I do, I'm going to share with you and your listeners every single day. I give thanks for my vibrant health. I give thanks that every single cell in my body is vibrant, energetic, radiant. Every single day I give thanks for that. And it's true. It is true that every cell in my body is vibrant and healthy and radiant because I say it so. I say it is so every day, and I give thanks for something, and I affirm something for myself every single day. So that is something that nobody needs money to do. Everybody can choose to do that if they want to.
I love that one. I'm putting that on my morning routine. I'm adding that.
Good.
Because just you saying that just made me feel like a nice emotion. You know,
Well,
it shows you how powerful our words are.
They're so powerful. We're creating our reality through our words. And it just breaks my heart because, for example, teenage girls. Okay, I have a teenage daughter. She just turned 15. Okay, now I'll tell you objectively, most of the world would agree that she's beautiful. Okay? She does not think she is. She walks around saying how she's not enough this, she's not enough that, she doesn't like this, she doesn't like that. Okay, why does she have that perception? That perception is dictated to her through content, through what our society says it values in this moment. So what if we just collectively decide that we're going to determine what's valuable? We're going to decide what's beautiful. Just, that we're going to be the authority on our health. What if we just took back that power? So again, it brings us back to this conversation of what we're giving our attention over to. If teenage girls are giving their attention over to all these TikToks and all these, whatever social media platform you want to mention, and saying, hey, I'm deficient in some way, then that is going to be true for them. They're going to create and perpetuate this self-hatred. And that's one of the most toxic things. And you're in Southern California just as I am, right? Mm-hmm. Southern California is it's a mecca for beauty. Okay, we can just agree. Everyone here, this is like the land of the beautiful. All right, everyone here is just, they're gorgeous, and if they're not gorgeous, they can just pay to have whatever alteration to make themselves gorgeous. Okay.
No shortage of surgery around here.
Right. But you may as well know, because I've seen it in my clinical practice. People come in, they've had all kinds of surgeries, but they still don't think they're beautiful. But by all objective standards, people would agree that they are, but they don't feel beautiful. But you can meet someone who feels that they're beautiful, and guess what? They project beauty, whether they're beautiful or not. So again, it comes back to those feeling states and how our feeling states are influencing our perception of the world.
Yeah. And it just shows you like how powerful that is. No wonder if that is kind of cloudy and negative, how it could affect every single thing in our life. And I think this putting attention here, and like you said, how this is so much more powerful than some of the physical stuff, because even when you change some of that stuff, you're still going to be left with the person that you are, your spirit, what you're saying to yourself, what you're thinking about everything that happens to you. So this is so important. This work is so important. And do you recommend people start with your book? Because you talk about this in your book, your emotional postures. There are 6 of them in your book, correct?
Yes.
And I feel like that's probably such a great place to start, because this work is so important. I mean, and then you mentioned your daughter. I have 2 boys, and like they're growing up in such a different space than how we grew up because of all the content and the input that they're getting, and a lot of it not great. So this is important work for our kids too, and like for us to be aware of. So tell us more about your book, and then tell us if somebody wants to work with you, tell us how to do that. And I'll make sure, and I know you're on Instagram, so we'll make sure that everybody go follow you there as well. But tell us a little bit more about your book.
Okay, so I absolutely love this book. All right, I wrote this book for everyone to be able to access. because I really believe that when we know better, we do better. And so I really tried to distill down the information and to make it practical and accessible for everyone. That said, depending on a person's level of consciousness, they may not be able to relate to the information. Sure. I think the book is a great starting place because, you know, you don't even have to read the book in a linear way. You can pick the book up, you can read about a particular law, a particular universal law. You can read about a particular emotional posture. You can read about just the nervous system. You can read about, you know, empowered states or the power of posture. You can inform yourself because, again, the more we know about our body and the more we understand how our emotions influence our life, the better. So I think the book is a great place for anyone to start. And if somebody reads the book and they think, you know, I really want to dive deeper because this information makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't know how to practically incorporate it into my life, yes, they can find me. And if, you know, somebody decides, you know, I have, you know, overcome a major health issue, or I just want to be better in my life, or I want that level of coaching, they can also find me. And I will work them through this work in a very methodical way, so very structured way. My book was born from the work that I've been doing for 21 years clinically, and what I have found works and moves the needle the quickest. So I have 2 different coaching programs that I offer. One is much shorter and one works with the physical plane, regulating the nervous system, getting the chemistry balanced in the body, meaning the neurochemicals, right? So people that are just every day living in anxiety, depression, stress, and they want to address the physicality of that. I offer a 3-month coaching program for that. That's going to get them on track physically. And a lot of times, you know, people they'll end up wanting to do the mental and emotional work because they'll see the value. But for people that know, hey, I want to address this in a holistic fashion, which eventually you have to address every area if you want true health. For those people, I offer a 6-month program. And going back to an earlier conversation that we had, about, you know, how it's so easy to measure the physical, right? We've got BMI, we've got weight, we've got all these things. I personally love data. So when I work with people on a coaching level, I do labs, pre and post labs. I do biofeedback, so we can look at the level of regulation in the system before and after, and I use clinical instruments to measure, you know, their executive functioning and all of that before and after, so that we can actually be able to look at how much did we move the needle. And that's something that I find personally satisfying, but the people that I work with find that very satisfying as well, because oftentimes the results are much higher than what they expected.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I work, of course, virtually, but I also am available in person. My brick and mortar location is northern San Diego County, right near Carlsbad. I work in Encinitas, California, but I also see people virtually, and I do everything virtually as well. So either one is available.
Okay, so I will make sure to link your website. So anyone who wants to check that out, please do. I mean, I think this is such important work, and I will also link your Instagram. I just followed you this morning. So thank you so much. This is so amazing. I really appreciate you coming on, and it's such a pleasure to meet you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.